Hello and welcome to another segment of the LPE Author Chat Series. I am your host, Kimberly K. LaBoo, CEO and founder of LaBoo Publishing Enterprise. I haven't been on Author Chat for a while, so I am super excited to be back with you guys. And I'm also excited because we have an amazing guest this evening, Ms. Kwanza Gipson. She is the founder of Girlfriend Therapy Ministry, which is a full deliverance ministry. It is a movement designed to encourage and empower women on their spiritual journey through the Word of God to be all that God has designed them to be without apology or compromise. She is so many amazing things: a wife, a mother, an author, a publisher, a speaker, a minister, but most of all, I am blessed to call her friend. And I refer to Kwanza lovingly as my most consistent Christian friend that I know. I am so honored to have her on the show today. So welcome, Kwanza.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm still trying to figure out my technology here, but thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
You said so many kind words. I'm like, oh my. Thank you.
And I meant every bit of it,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we'll push through our technical difficulties here, and I think we're on the right track right now, so we're going to just go for it.
Yes.
So I'm excited to talk to you about your new book release titled Reflections of a Life Well Lived: Stories, Anecdotes, Essays, and Nuggets.
Yes.
Hey, she has the book right there. I love it. I love it. I love it. So first, tell us about the title of the book. Why did you title it Reflections of a Life Well Lived?
I think because it was really just the journey of just reflecting over my life. And I always say like the emphasis of well can be either like, well, I lived, or, well lived. So however you read it, it's open to
Wow.
interpretation, I think. But it's definitely, just the story of, like I said, just anecdotes, nuggets, essays, and just stories. So
Right.
each chapter is like you can kind of read it by itself. You don't have to read it from, cover to cover, which is what I love about it, that you can just open it up at any chapter and just read and get, either you'll read a story, you'll read a little anecdote, an essay, or a nugget. So that's where the title kind of came from.
That's awesome. And I really love it. Like, I've had the pleasure of reading through and working through some parts of it with you. And it was so fun for me. It's just really a breath of fresh air is what I think about when I think about your book. It's just really refreshing. And I was really intrigued by your stories. Why did you write the book in the way that you wrote it? You tell your stories, and it's really an intimate look, in-depth look at your life. So why did you choose to share those parts of yourself with the world?
When I first set out to write the book, it was, I kind of made an agreement with myself that I would be as transparent as the story required. And so I kind of went into it without, with this idea that I wouldn't censor myself. I think sometimes in ministry, there's a lot of times where, you're often just kind of censoring yourself. You don't want to leave anything for misinterpretation. And so when I set out to write the book, it was like whatever comes up is what I was going to write about. And I was going to write about it, unhindered, and just kind of let the words come out the way that they needed to come out. And so that was kind of just the initial approach. And so the stories, although, I couldn't capture everything, the stories that came up were the ones I believe were supposed to be shared. So.
Amen. That's awesome. So you are like this master storyteller.
Oh.
I love to hear you share stories. When you do it, whether it be on Facebook Live or if it's in the written word, I just love the way that you tell stories. So you just have this way of drawing people into the story. Like, we can see the colors and we can see the objects that you're describing, and we can see, all of your funny gestures through your words, and it's really amazing. So have you always been blessed with the gift of writing?
I think so. I always say that I was really born to write. I love storytelling. I love the art of storytelling. I think that, if I believed in former lives, I believe that in a former life, I would have been in some village as the storyteller. I just really believe that that's just a part of who I am. I think I share in a book, I say that, I think I fell in love with words first, and then to be able to string them together to come up with a story was just like magical for me. Because I do believe that I've always been just born to be a storyteller.
Yeah, I can tell. It comes through. It comes through in your writing for real. Um,
Amen.
so one of my favorite stories in the book, or one of my favorite chapter in the book is planting and watering. And
Oh,
it's great to talk about all of your uncles. And I think for me,
mm,
that chapter was so special for me because it's something that I never had.
oh
So to
wow.
be able to tap into that part of your life where you had all of these amazing
Mm,
male figures in your life that supported you and uplifted you and taught you and shared wisdom, for
yeah.
me, it was so special to be able to walk through that and see those stories and feel that. It was just really amazing. So talk a little bit about that chapter.
That chapter, it started off because I've just been surrounded by amazing men just growing up. And I know that's not a common story, especially for young
Yeah.
Black girls growing up in a male dominated family. Although my family was, I think, more female dominated, but there was still enough men around and intricate, in my child rearing, involved in my upbringing. They weren't just like these, what is the word? Like support cast, or, just these background characters, but they were really involved in my child rearing. And I have seven uncles, six
Wow.
uncles. I had to count them off. I have six uncles, and each of them just really just played a really special role in my life, as you can read in the book. I have one
Yeah.
uncle that's left. Everyone else, actually, I have five uncles. I'm sorry, I'm doing my math wrong, but I have one uncle that's left. The other four, have already gone on to be with the Lord, but they have just instilled in me just such a sense of what manhood looks like, and
Mhm.
what the support and the covering and the protection of man looks like.
Yeah.
That I think that, that along with my dad, along with my grandfathers, who I talk about in my book as well.
Mhm.
It's just been just a beautiful story of, what it looks like when men do the right thing within a family, and the
Yeah.
impact that they can leave, not just on their nephews, but on their nieces as well. And
Mhm.
I just really feel blessed to have had the uncles that I've had. So
Yeah. You are blessed to have had that. I think
yeah,
my favorite was Uncle Yusuf. Is that how
yeah,
you say his name? Yusuf?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
You guys have probably heard me talk about Uncle Yusuf a lot. He was uh and I'm trying not to get emotional because, as you know, he actually just
Yeah.
passed a few months ago. But Uncle
Yeah.
Yusuf has continued to be um, just an incredible mentor to me. I often share, that we share different faiths. He was Muslim, I'm Christian, but every conversation that we had, we always started off, he would, I would call him or he would call me, and it's like, hey, Uncle Yusuf, how are you? And he'd say, God is most merciful. And I'm like, amen. And we began every conversation like that. And so, like, our faiths never clashed. He was
Mhm.
he just taught me so much, just about, I think, just about practicing your faith, not necessarily
Mhm.
whatever faith, or whatever it was that you believe, but just his devotion to his faith was such an inspiration to me. And so he was always just a voice of reason for me, a very sound voice of reason, and could always point it back to our faiths. Although, like I said, we practice different faiths. He was just an incredible man of God for me, an incredible example of what a man of God looks like.
Yeah. And I just loved him.
Yeah.
I felt like after reading your book, I felt like I knew him. So when you
Oh,
post that he passed, I actually felt that. I was like, oh
mhm.
my goodness. And
Yeah.
that's like a really testament to your writing is, like I said, that you've allowed us into your space, you
Yeah.
know, that intimate space to be able to connect with your family and you and the things that you experienced growing up. So I just think it's a phenomenal piece of work. It's
Amen.
yeah, it's just a phenomenal piece of work. It's like, yeah, just keep it like that. Now, my favorite character, look, I'll say character,
Right.
book is of course Buffy.
Oh,
So
yes.
I want you to share a little bit about Buffy with our audience. Who is Buffy?
Uh, so for people who, all of my Philly family is like, okay, because they get it. So Buffy was my childhood name, and I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but when I go back to West Philadelphia, where I'm from, a lot of the neighbors and friends, they still call me Buffy. Um,
Mhm.
but I share about Buffy, actually share about, I was born Kwanza Conwell. Buffy is my nickname. And so I share about those four different parts of who I am, which is really, a lot of people don't know these different parts of me. Buffy was my childhood, West Philadelphia. So people that grew up with me in West Philadelphia understand her. Conwell was my military. A lot of people don't know that I was in the military. So Conwell was, my military persona, because in the military, they call you by your last name. Kwanzaa, most people are familiar with Kwanzaa because I think everybody that knows me now knows me as Kwanzaa. And so everything that I've done that people have connected with is really under, this image of Kwanzaa. And then Faleka, who, who's just kind of recently emerged in my life, is my middle name. And when I do my art, I always sign it Faleka. So
Yeah,
there's that. A lot of people was like, "What's Faleka?" So that's my
yeah,
middle name. But Buffy is
yeah,
just, I think Buffy is just the innocence of who I am. And I think we all have like that childlike innocence. And I always say, as long as I can look in my eyes and still see Buffy, I know that no matter what's going on in the world, like it just gives me some sense of anchoring. Because it really is just that childhood innocence, that, um, just that little girl that dreams big, and her eyes are just wide open to all the possibilities, and and I still tap into her every now and then. But
yeah,
growing up in West Philadelphia, you're trying to find yourself. You're especially, I come from a huge family, and so I talk about trying to find yourself amongst an entire huge family.
mm,
um, and
yeah,
and the more I stretched out,
yeah,
the more difficult that became. So I kind of share a lot about that. But Buffy is just that, that childhood innocence. That is I think, the heart and soul of who I am.
yeah. So, do you want to share a Buffy story?
You mean, you mean one from the book or just one off the top of my head?
Oh, either.
Um, well, I'll share a real quick one because I don't know how much time you have. But I was actually
Okay.
just talking with my aunt, and she has been enjoying this book, which has been such a blessing, because when you do something like this, a lot of times you're not sure how people will receive it. But she has really embraced it. And she said, I just laughed and I cried, and like she's really enjoying it. And I was just sharing with her, we were talking about, her husband, my uncle Cato. And I was sharing with her that she was sharing with me, like, yeah, he's having a hard time. I think most men are having a hard time with this lockdown. And
Right.
she was like, she was reading my book, and she was showing him, like, this is the book that Buffy wrote. And he was like, well, tell her to give me my quarter, because when I was a kid, every time I would see my Uncle Cato, I would say, Uncle Cato, you got a quarter I can borrow. And so over the years, that's kind of been our thing, that I have borrowed so many quarters from him over the years. But so every time he sees me, he's like,
So
you
you
got my
give it back.
quarter? Right? So he's
That is
like, every
so
time he
cool.
sees me, he's like, you got my quarter? So that was Buffy. She was just, I mean,
A
she was just,
riot.
yeah, she was just fun. Just,
Yeah.
wasn't afraid
I
to talk
mean,
to adults, which I think is kind of added to the character that I am, because I've
mhm.
never been that kid that was afraid to talk to adults. So I had, like, always had like this really old soul where I would go and, I share a story about I call my village and my tribe in that chapter. And I talk about just the neighbors that
Mhm.
kind of helped raise me. And
Yeah.
I talk about Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, who obviously were elders and seniors. And I would knock on their door at like 4 years old and ask if they can come out. I would, sit on the
They could
steps.
come out.
Exactly. And I
Oh
would
my
sit on the
God.
porch and they would indulge me. Like they would talk to me and, act like they cared about what was going on in my little 4-year-old, 5-year-old world. And so those are the people that really just kind of cultivated me, honestly. Um,
Right,
yeah.
right. I love it. I love it. And just, I mean, and to our viewing audience, like you can feel the joy that comes from the stories. And this is
Yeah.
kind of the feel of the project. This book is just, it's that, um, like I said at the beginning, it's just like this breath of fresh air. And
Amen.
so I believe anyone who reads the book will certainly be blessed by it, especially in a time like this where we
Amen.
are right now. I believe that your book is one that would just really uplift the soul. So
Amen.
for those of you who don't have it, um, this is one that I would wholeheartedly endorse and say,
Amen.
do yourself a favor and just be blessed by this work because Kwanza is an amazing writer, a great
Amen.
storyteller, and it's stories that are worth reading. So
Amen.
just such a blessing, just such a blessing. So let's see. Um, Tell me what the writing process looked like for you for this project. Like, what was the writing process like for you in this?
I'm glad you said this project because it
Yeah.
always varies. But this project, it was because it was so personal and it was coming at a time where, I was coming off of some, just like some self-reflection and
Yeah.
really trying to just hear my heart, even for myself, just me hearing my heart,
Mhm.
and taking all the things that I've learned and really just like, it's like, you're going into a new season. And this
Yeah.
project just helped me prepare for that new season. Um,
Mm.
and realizing now on the other side of it that it was really a season of just complete and total confidence,
Mm.
and complete and total assurance, just like really being okay with me.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like just pulling all the pieces together. So again,
Mm.
for this project, I mean, I've shared things in this book that I've never shared it publicly before. So that was a bit daunting, just to talk about, dating violence, to talk about,
Yeah.
I have a chapter there, hashtag me too. So to share stories,
Yeah.
about, sexual mistreatment, for lack of a better word. Um, so this book, it felt like this was the time for this
Mhm.
to come out. This was a time for me to write it, and not just for the sake of writing it, but really
Mhm.
just knowing that everything that's written has a purpose and a meaning. And I think it was, I would say it was for me first, like I said, just preparing me to go into that new season of my life. But I think it's also for my family, like my children, for their children, just to
Yeah.
really be able to say that, man, I had a grandmother, Kwanza, she was here, she existed. And this is kind of some of the things from her life. And, prayerfully
Yeah.
will encourage them and inspire them. But then I think it's written for other people who would dare to read it, second,
Mhm.
because I think that the stories are universal. Um, One of the bits of feedback that I've been getting back is, people are kind of taking a step back and looking at their own family dynamics. Like you mentioned, Kimberly, when you said, reading the chapter about my uncles, it made you kind of think and reflect about your uncles. And
Mhm.
I've had other people kind of have similar responses. So this
Wow.
book, it almost wrote itself when I got out of the way, but there
Mhm.
were times where, I mean, and I'm so grateful to you because you really did help me through this process, because I knew I needed to get it out, and I needed an accountability partner, for lack of a better word, just someone to kind of expect it. And so
Yeah.
writing the chapters in a sequence and at the timeline that we had set up was incredibly
Mhm.
helpful because I knew that I owed you chapters, even though I
Yeah.
wasn't able to stick with the weekly thing. but I tried to stick to it and commit to it as much as possible. But I will honestly say the weeks that I didn't provide, it wasn't because I wasn't writing. It was just, there were
Right.
times where I kind of got stuck.
Hmm.
And there were a couple of chapters where I just really kind of got stuck and I could not get past my own self to get the words out.
Hmm.
But like I said, when I kind of just trusted the process and just allowed myself to say it the way that I felt,
Yeah.
it became a lot easier. So I think this book, unlike any other book that I've written, because it is personal, it just kind of took its own kind of journey, and the process was just completely different. I really,
Mhm.
one of the things I always tell other authors is, enjoy the process. And I had to really kind of remind myself of that, enjoy the process,
Yeah.
because at times it became really tough. Other times it was like,
Mhm.
it was just a blast to write,
Right.
just a ball of joy to write. But then there were those times where it was really tough to write. So I just had to remind myself to enjoy the process.
So do you think that is what had you stuck though, is that you were beginning to try to censor yourself in those areas?
Absolutely.
It was. Oh,
Absolutely.
wow.
Because
Wow.
it was always, because, when you're sharing stories and you're trying to be sensitive, because
Hmm.
nobody's life is their life, in their own little vacuum. It's like your life
Yeah.
exists as it relates to the people that you encounter, and the experiences that you have. And so when I'm talking about, experiences that were difficult, you know,
Hmm.
when I'm censoring myself, I'm trying to think like, okay, how would someone else, interpret this? How would they feel about it?
Hmm.
How would they, how I really tried to be careful in taking into consideration how people felt. And, my life isn't reckless, so there's not a lot of,
Right.
salaciousness in the book. But there
Hmm.
were some things that happened. You can imagine growing up in West Philadelphia. I used to say in the heroin era of the 70s, the cocaine era of the 80s, like you can only
Wow.
imagine the things that a young Buffy would have experienced or would have seen.
Hmm.
And so really being sensitive to my community, being sensitive to my family, because like I said, my story wasn't just my story, it was as it intertwined with the lives of the people that was around me. Um,
Hmm.
so even just being gentle in the words that I use, the language that I use, the things that I focused on. Um, yeah, just and censoring it in that way, but really keeping in mind how people would feel about it.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You talked a little bit about legacy, and that really is what this book feels like. It does. I commend you for it because you have really
Mhm.
created a masterpiece that your family for
Amen.
years to come is going to be able to look back on and say, this is who Kwanzaa was or is.
Yes.
And it's just like a beautiful piece of work. And I really feel that you have, written a great piece to add to your legacy. So
Amen.
bravo to you on that.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
don't
Thank
think I've
you.
seen it done that well.
Wow.
So yeah,
Amen.
really, really good. So we did mention that you do have other titles.
I
I think I
do.
have all of them. So
And of course, I
I
have
love
them
your
next to
writing.
me. I always got to keep them
Awesome.
next to me. Yes. So
So
my
tell our
first book.
audience a little bit about those two.
Absolutely. So the first book is No Greater Love, which I'm telling you, this was like the dessert of all the books that I've written. This was absolutely the dessert, and I can't wait to get back to something like this. This is a fiction work, and it's a love
Yeah.
story, and it's kind of loosely inspired by the Book of Job.
Mm,
Yeah, so it's just about loss and love and redemption and finding your way back to God after loss. This is one
yeah.
of my favorites. All of my books are my favorite for different
Yes.
reasons, but this was certainly the dessert. God let me start with this first,
Yeah.
so I did this one in 2009. But this is also available on my website as well. And then
Yeah.
my second book is According to Your Faith Be It Unto You. And this
Mm,
was the smallest book that I've done. It's only 100 and I think maybe like 114 pages. Actually,
mm-hmm.
104 pages. So this was like the smallest book that I've done, but it was like it was laborious because there was so much research, and
Yeah.
this was kind of my first approach of letting people know about me. But it's
Yeah.
kind of me from my faith walk journey. So I share a lot of anecdotes about just my experience with the faith, not just I believe because God said believe, but I believe,
Yeah.
and here's the reasons why I believe. So I talk a lot about just trusting God during my journey. Um,
Mhm.
and so the actual subtitle of this is, it's according to your faith, be it unto you. But the subtitle is understanding the power of faith. And in this
Mm.
season, just understanding what faith looks like, in
Yeah.
real time. This book is a very quick read, but I go back to this book often just to refresh myself and remind myself, kind of like with, King David, what God has done for him before. So this is kind of
Yeah.
like my, one of my go-tos. But like I said,
Yeah, another great piece of work.
yeah, thank you so much.
I really enjoyed that. I remember coming to the book signing for that one
Yes.
and hearing your stories once
Yes,
again.
yes, yes. So, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you, it was something because after writing this, I shared a few personal stories. And I remember coming
Mhm.
out of church one day, and this girl who had read it, she's like, "Oh, I feel like I know you so much better now." And I'm just like,
You're like, "Oh."
yeah, I felt super vulnerable. And,
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
feeling vulnerable isn't a good feeling. But so to go from that to writing
Right to
reflections
this.
of it, yeah. So it was certainly a journey, certainly a journey.
Wow. Wow. And a testament to your growth as well.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. So what was the most difficult part about writing for you? What is the most difficult part, if anything, for you?
In general, or
In general.
um, I think. Let me see. I feel like it changed with each project, so I'm trying to
Uh-huh.
find a general point of difficulty across
Mhm.
all the projects. I guess I wouldn't even say time.
Okay.
Um, I think I would honestly say I think the most difficult part, writing is not difficult for me. Finding the
Mhm.
time to write isn't necessarily difficult for me. I think it's just the what will people think is I think the
Mm.
most difficult. Like, will they buy the book? Will they care to read the book? Will they have good
Yeah.
feedback? I remember with No
Mhm.
Greater Love, and this was my first book, my first time out the gate, as a published author. And I was at an event, and this lady, I was there for the whole week. This woman had came and she purchased the book, and I like to say that everything that I write is faith based, meaning that it is
Right.
anchored in, you'll find scripture in there, and everything is pointing
Mhm.
back to the faith. And so in No Greater Love, I have this one part of the book where my character Emmanuel, I say that he's in a car and he's listening to Luther Vandross. And so this lady, she purchased the book, the day before rather. And then she came back, and I can see when she came back, she had like this peculiar look on her face. And and I can see that she had like her bookmark, because this is literally like
Oh,
maybe
wow.
page one or two. So I can see she had her bookmark like right, page one or two. She didn't get too deep into the book. And she
Right.
walked over to me and she was like, I thought this book was Christian. And I was like, it is. And she says, well, why is he listening to Luther Vandross?
Oh my gosh.
I said, because he's not religious. It's like, I don't know. I mean,
Wow.
and so I said, she really gonna be mad because at one point further down in the book, he was jogging to DMX. So I said, she really gonna have an attitude. She have a problem with
He's
Luther
gonna be
Vandross.
Googling who
But
is DMX
right. So,
and be like, "Oh,
exactly. She probably threw the book in the
too
trash, probably
funny,
burned it. But
too funny."
so I think that,
Wow.
really for me, it's just people's response is probably the most
Mhm.
difficult part about writing is people's
Wow.
response. Yes.
Right. That's awesome. So as we begin to wrap up, I do want to ask, what is a piece of advice that you would have for new authors about the writing process and
Mm.
also after the book is published?
One of the things I always say, first of all, for the writer itself, just really trust your voice.
Mm, that's a
Really
good one.
trust your voice. I think that there is an audience out there for everyone. So really trust your voice. I think once you get published, and I think when you trust your voice, then you trust what it is that you produce. So even working with
Yeah.
publishers, um, putting my publisher hat on, I can help
Mhm.
you paint the story, but it has to
Yeah,
be your words. And even when I make recommendations or suggestions, my goal is for you to really be confident in what you wrote, because your name is on it. As a
yeah,
publisher, my logo or my symbol might be on it, but on the very front
mhm,
cover is your name. And whatever words
yeah,
are in there, however it's written, you want it to be something that you're proud of, because it's a reflection of you, first and foremost.
absolutely.
So I would say just, trust your voice and tell the story the way that you want to tell it. I understand
Mhm.
sometimes when you're working with big publishing houses, you don't really have the luxury, because, it is a business and people do want to sell books. And sometimes, the salacious stories sell.
Mhm.
But as much as you can control it to the point where it really is your words and what you're comfortable with, I would say certainly, stand true to your words, and make it,
Yeah,
and understand that it is a representation of you first.
absolutely. Great advice. Great
Yeah.
advice. So tell our wonderful listeners how they can find your books, because I really do want them to read them.
Okay, so I have on my Facebook platform, under my name, Kwanza Gipson. There's a link, and so what I did with my other books, I actually had it like on Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, and all those different places. But I'm like, in this capitalistic society, I just like to hold on to my own investment. So
Uh,
as I was building up for the release of this book, I was just kind of like, I really didn't want to put it on Amazon. Although I know a lot
mhm.
of people, a lot of times they want to see that you're on these bigger
Yeah.
platforms. But I think
Mhm.
we've come a long enough way, in this
Yeah.
this consumer society, where we can really establish and start our own platforms. And so
Yeah.
I just created a platform on Store Envy, and I created my own bookstore, and it's called Kwanzaa's Bookstore. And on that platform, you can find and purchase all of my books. I am my own distributor, so every book that goes out comes from me. So I can
Mm.
guarantee and assure that, all of them will be signed. Every book I send out, I have like my, author signature copy.
Mhm.
So I sign every book that I send out. But you can
Mhm.
go to, I think it's just, and I don't have the link in my head, but I know if you
Okay.
go to Store Envy and you search Kwanzaa's books, and that's
Mhm.
KWANZA apostrophe S books, BOOKS. Then you can find all of my titles there.
And we can put the link in the comments
Oh,
of
perfect.
the video. Yeah,
Perfect.
so people after it's over, they can
Okay.
click the link and just go right to it. So we'll make sure we do that as well.
Perfect. I
So,
will do
do
that.
you have parting thoughts for our audience?
Just keep writing. I'm telling you, it's
Yeah.
so therapeutic. And I always say there's an audience that, like, some people get intimidated by the fact that there's so many books out there and so many people are writing. But there's an audience waiting to hear your voice in only the way that you
Amen.
can say it. And so don't
Yeah.
worry about what anybody else has wrote or what they published or how it looks
Yeah.
and how closely it may resemble what you have in mind. There's just that
Mhm.
audience that's for you, and they're waiting to hear your voice. So,
Absolutely.
just write. And again,
Ab
trust your voice and trust your story, that whatever it is that you have to share, trust that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, thank you so much for being my guest this evening. Again, that was Kwanza Gipson. And like I said, we'll put the link for her books in the comments of this video so that you can go and support her work. I promise you, you will be truly blessed
Amen.
just from reading, especially this latest work. But all of her books are amazing. But I've just fallen in love with Reflections of a Life Well Lived. So
Amen.
you want to hold your book up one more time so they can see what the cover looks like?
And my son
Yeah,
actually like, this is a family affair. My son actually designed the book cover from a photo that my husband took, and yeah, there's a whole story behind it,
nice
but this is the book cover.
story.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So just thank you so much for being with us this evening, and to our viewing audience, thank you so much for tuning in to another segment of the LPE Author Chat series. And I look forward to hanging out with you guys again for the next session. So thank you so much. Take care, be blessed, and have a great night.